Welcome to St. Mary's College's Martin Luther King Day celebration. I'm Katie Conboy, president of the college. This day is observed each year on the third Monday in January as a day on, not a day off. Martin Luther King Day is the only federal holiday designated as a national day of service to encourage all Americans to volunteer to improve their communities. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used the power of words and acts of nonviolent resistance, such as protests, grassroots organizing, and civil disobedience, to achieve seemingly impossible goals. He went on to lead campaigns against poverty and national conflict and international conflict, always maintaining fidelity to his principles that men and women everywhere, regardless of color or creed, are equal members of the human family. We certainly need his spirit today. So thank you for nominating individuals who work in that spirit. Today, we will honor 12 individuals or groups with the Martin Luther King Jr. Drum Major Award. Martin Luther King Day was first observed in 1986, 35 years ago. I am thrilled that St. Mary's added it to our official holidays 3 years ago. This is the first year we're virtual, but the spirit is as powerful in this format as it is in person. And I'm so glad you joined us.
Sound. As the rolling sea. I like this part right here. Come on. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song add a little something to it. Just to encourage you. We're gonna take you to church later. Let's go! We'll keep marching right until the victory's won. To all my brothers out there. Hold your head up, brother, till the victory is won. To all my sisters in the struggle. Keep believing, sister, till the victory is won. Till that day. Till that day comes. Hey. Let us march on. To victory. Till victory is won.
Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Hi, I'm Giovanna Perdiso. I'm the Student Buddy President, and I wanted to share a couple thoughts of what Dr. King means to me in my life. I'm a big quote person, so obviously he has a lot of great quotes, but two of my favorites are, the first one is, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And I love that quote because it keeps you mindful of the fact that all little injustices add up to big injustices, and nothing is ever too small to confront in the face of equality. And the second quote I love, and I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up. "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear." And I love that because it's so true, and he's really speaking to the way that he manifested his civil disobedience and being peaceful in the matter of protest in such a face of evil. And to be able to rise above that, I just find to be insane. I don't even know if I could do that. And the way he managed to turn the other cheek against violence and continue to push forward and make change is so admirable to me. And I'm so thankful that he did, because like he said, and I love to say, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So any inequalities in society is not tolerable, and we need to continue to fight them wherever we see them, small, large, medium, anywhere. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Regina Hill, Executive Director of Inclusion and Equity. As Chair of the President's Council on Inclusivity and Multicultural Diversity, I have the pleasure of announcing our 2021 Martin Luther King Jr. Drum Major recipients. Throughout the program, we will recognize 12 individuals or groups that were nominated because of their personal and professional commitment to further the vision of Dr. King, especially in the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. The President's Council on Inclusivity and Multicultural Diversity would like to recognize the following: Leslie Wong, Sabelli Webb, Katie Loringen, and Kelly Hamilton. Thank you for serving as a model for the entire St. Mary's College community and for upholding the mission of the institution.
My name is Ramona Bethany, class of 2004 St. Mary's College, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has been the template for the greatest achievements in my life. Much like Dr. King, my dedication to learning paralleled my dedication to helping people. As a first-year student at St. Mary's, I received the Drum Major for Peace Award during the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. annual breakfast in the city of South Bend. I took on the path of theological studies just like Dr. King, completing a master's degree in the field of intercultural and urban studies from Moody Theological Seminary in Chicago. While learning and serving in Chicago, I received a certificate of completion in Kenyan nonviolence principles, the same nonviolence principles that have weaved into every aspect of my career. I could not have foreseen such a trajectory. I went from receiving a Dr. King themed award to now preparing to issue grant awards to willing, dedicated workers in efforts to reduce violence in the city of South Bend through the Office of Community Initiatives. I have been personally and professionally impacted by Dr. King, and honestly, I know that this is just the beginning of how his influence will continue to impact my life. Thank you.
Because of Dr. King, communities feel more empowered to resist and speak out.
Because of Dr. King, I have the right to vote.
Because of Dr. King, communities of color are now represented, and I feel like I can advocate and feel inspired by his works.
Because of Dr. King, more women of color have positions of power, and that's inspiring to me.
Thank you, Dr. King.
The President's Council on Inclusivity and Multicultural Diversity would like to announce the following for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drum Major recognition: Mana Derekshani, Regina Hill, Jessica Koblenz, Jalen King. Thank you for serving as a model for the entire St. Mary's community and for upholding the mission of the institution.
Hi, and greetings from a very snowy Salt Lake City, Utah. My name is Emmy Gardner, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of Holy Cross Ministries. I want to share with you the rich history and legacy of justice work in our state provided by the Sisters of the Holy Cross. Many do not know that the Sisters of the Holy Cross came to the state back in 1875 and that they worked closely with Brigham Young, the then president of the Mormon Church. He had heard of the amazing work of the sisters during the Civil War as they functioned as the first Navy nurses, and he was eager to ask them for their help in building a hospital for the coal miners in Utah. The sisters not only built hospitals, they built schools, grade schools, high schools, orphanages, the first nursing school in the state. Their health system was the only health system at the time of the AIDS epidemic to actually create an infectious disease wing to care for patients affected by the disease. No other health system at the time would do that. That is the compassionate justice of the Sisters of the Holy Cross. Fast forward to 1995, and the sisters discerned that Utah could benefit from a social service agency that would identify unmet needs of the immigrant population. That is how Holy Cross Ministries was born. Our 3 pillars of service, health, justice, and education, were founded by identifying those needs in the clients and how we could best serve them. Our immigration program was the first and remains the largest U-Visa provider in the state. U-Visas are a pathway to citizenship for an immigrant victim of crime. Our education program is 2-pronged, with an evidence-based parents as teachers home visiting curriculum and a school readiness classroom. We want to prepare our English language learners so that they can thrive in school just like their peers. Our health outreach program is also a 2-pronged program, and there we have a fully licensed trauma-informed counseling service. Again, working with victims of crime, primarily sexual assault and domestic violence. Our health outreach workers, promotora, as we say in Spanish, are what you would call today community health workers, and they really work with our immigrant population to help them navigate a very complex health system. As we've seen through this COVID pandemic, many of our essential workers have been adversely affected. They also provide prevention classes such as prenatal courses, prediabetes, and living with chronic conditions. Again, trying to raise the health outlook for many immigrants who don't have easy access to health care. On behalf of all of us here at Holy Cross Ministries, we are humbled and honored that the President's Council on Inclusivity and Multicultural Diversity has asked us to be a part of the 2021 Martin Luther King Jr. virtual celebration. We stand in solidarity with our immigrant brothers and sisters and continue to work to meet their needs, as well as to create a more just, inclusive, and compassionate society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. King.
Thank you, Dr. King.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. King.
Thank you.
Thank you. Obrigada.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. King.
Hi, I'm Jamie Wagman in the Department of History and Gender and Women's Studies. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a day to reflect on the long arc of the civil rights movement and on Dr. King's legacy and what people are still fighting for in this country today, the fight for equality. I am so grateful to Dr. King for all he gave to the United States. King is an icon, a leader, and his legacy demands that we continue to learn and reflect over the 1963 March on Washington, Selma, the 64 Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Montgomery bus boycott, Brown versus Board, and the Greensboro sit-in movement. A year ago, I took my children to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and we walked through hundreds of years of painful and inspiring history. After our day of study, we took solace in a room with King's quote framing a fountain. We are determined to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. His message needs to be carried on. We must all still be determined to work and fight. As a mother, a historian, and a humanist, this is the most important message I can ever give to others. Let's keep learning, working, and fighting together. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ian Weaver, and I am a professor in the art department, as well as the director of the Moreau Art Galleries. I was honored to be invited to speak about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I was also slightly overwhelmed because there are so many aspects to his legacy that are inspiring. If I had to choose one aspect of his legacy that has been the most impactful for me and how I live my life, it is his approach to service. Dr. King once said, "Everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love." I'm struck by how this, quote, new definition of greatness, as he stated, is within everyone's reach. I think about this every day as I ask myself, how can I be of service to my family, to my colleagues, to my students, and to my community? Thank you.
The President's Council on Inclusivity and Multicultural Diversity would like to announce the following for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drum Major Recognition: Jamie Wagman, Kristen Lynch, La Frosa, Sandra Giraldo. Thank you for serving as a model for the entire St. Mary's College community and for upholding the mission of the institution.
50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am weak, I am tired, I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on through the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on.
Today, we gather together virtually to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Although Dr. King is revered today, at the time of his death, he was disliked by many Americans. In fact, according to a 1968 poll, 75% of Americans disapproved of the civil rights movement and disliked the leaders. Even though Dr. King knew he was hated and that people were trying to kill him, it did not stop him from fighting for the freedoms, not only for himself, but for others. You see, Dr. King was selfless. He and his family sacrificed so much so that we could experience some of the liberties that we have available today. In 1963, during a speech in Detroit, Dr. King said, "There are some things so dear, some things so precious, some things so eternally true that they are worth dying for. And I submit to you that if a man has not discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live." I believe Dr. King discovered his purpose, his why, and lived willing to die for it. As a child, my mother would share with me her memories of growing up in Chicago during the Civil Rights era. She taught me the importance of getting an education, of using my voice to take up space in the classroom that was once denied to Black people, the importance of sitting in front of the bus and exercising my right to vote, to fight for racial justice, and most importantly, to speak up for those who were voiceless. Growing up hearing these stories, I often wonder what part I would have played in the movement if I were alive to experience it. Well, this past summer, as the country was forced to deal with the realities of racial injustice that for centuries the Black community has been crying loud about due to the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, I no longer had to wonder because I was compelled to act. I attended a march with my mother and daughter, continuing the legacy of teaching my daughter the importance of fighting for what's right, even if it seems unpopular. I spoke at a prayer rally sponsored by various religious leaders in our community, and I utilized my intellectual activism by placing the power of my ideas and emotion in service to social justice by writing and speaking on several panels. I can imagine that Dr. King, as a man of faith, lived his life fulfilling the commandment to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. In Luke chapter 10, there's a very familiar story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus was asked the question, "Who is my neighbor?" in regards to the commandment. I believe the man wanted to make sure he knew exactly who he needed to love. So Jesus, as he often does, responded with a story. Jesus said, "A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes and beat him up and left him there half dead beside the road. A priest came along and saw the man lying there, but he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at the man lying there, but he also passed by on the other side." Then scripture tells us that a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. He bandaged him up and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins and told him to take care of this man. And if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you back the next time I see you. Then Jesus asked, "Which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked?" The man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus told him, "Yes, now go and do the same." So many times we like to think of ourselves as the Good Samaritan, when in actuality, we have behaved as the priest or the temple assistant in this story. We are living in a time when so many of our neighbors are wounded, hurting, and crying out in need of compassion and grace. In 2020, the global pandemic and racial unrest showed us exactly who our neighbors are. The Black and Brown communities have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19, and the elderly are the most vulnerable. I watched as crowds of protesters became more and more diverse as people from across the globe came together to amplify the voices of the Black community. If we want to embody the role of the Good Samaritan in the story, we must do what Jesus said when he told the man to go and do the same. How can you use your power, privilege, ability, and influence to help someone. As this day around the country is observed as a day of service, I challenge you to go and do the same. Serve your neighbors, love your neighbors, and fight for your neighbors. I hope you enjoyed our celebration. Congratulations to all of those who were recognized, and thank you for joining us.